All right, welcome in everyone to another deep dive. As the learner, you're probably always seeking knowledge, always pushing forward. And today we're tackling something really fundamental to just about everything, really. We're diving into the world of friendship.
Yeah, and I think for a lot of people, this idea of making good friends, it can feel a little, almost like a throwback to high school or
Right,
something.
like how to win friends and influence people kind of thing. But it is something that's so essential no matter what stage of life you're in. Yeah.
Absolutely. And I think that's why this guide we're looking at today, it's so refreshing because it really gets to the heart of what truly matters in those connections.
So let's jump right in. The guide kicks off with a pretty basic but really important question. It asks us to define what a good friend actually is. Like, what are those core qualities that resonate with you personally?
And, sometimes we go through life and we kind of assume we know what that means, but this guide really encourages us to kind of pause and dig a little deeper.
Right, like get really specific. Okay, so what are some of the key things that the guide lays out?
Well, it talks about trustworthiness, which obviously that's huge. But it's not just about keeping secrets or being reliable in practical ways. It's more about that deeper sense of someone whose actions align with their words.
Yeah, the consistency.
Exactly. And then there's the element of support, especially during those, inevitable tough times that we all go through. And it's not just about offering advice, it's about that genuine presence, just being there for someone.
Like really showing up.
Yeah, and then there's the aspect of being non-judgmental, creating that space where someone can feel accepted, where they can truly be themselves without that fear of criticism. I mean, that's so valuable, I think, in any close relationship.
Definitely. So it sounds like we're building this foundation here, trust, support, acceptance. What else is sort of part of this core definition of a good friend?
Well, the guide also highlights the importance of shared enjoyment, that element of fun, that spark of laughter and just genuine enjoyment of each other's company.
That makes sense.
Yeah, and finally, and I this goes without saying, but it's important to explicitly state it. Honesty. That genuine open communication, even when it's tough or maybe a little uncomfortable, that's a hallmark of a truly strong friendship.
Okay, so we've got this sort of framework in place, like what we look for in a good friend.
Yeah.
And then the guide kind of does this cool shift. It turns the focus inward, right? Like it starts talking about self-reflection.
Exactly. And I love that because it reminds us that building strong friendships starts with ourselves. It's not just about finding the right people, it's about being the right person.
So how does the guide suggest we go about that self-reflection?
Well, it poses some pretty direct questions, things like, are you a good listener? Do you make an effort to be kind and empathetic in your interactions? Do you follow through on commitments? It's getting us to really look at those fundamental behaviors that form the basis of any healthy relationship, including friendship.
So it's not just about what we want from others. It's about like being honest with ourselves about what we're bringing to the table.
Exactly. And I think what's so powerful about this part of the guide is that it makes this link between working on those qualities in ourselves and actually attracting like-minded people. It's saying that when we actively cultivate those traits, that genuine confidence, that authentic kindness, that reliability, it kind of radiates outward.
It makes us more magnetic, right?
Exactly.
Okay, so let's say you've done that work, you've reflected, you've got a clearer sense of what you're looking for, and you're committed to being a good friend to yourself.
Yeah.
Then there's this very practical challenge, right? Just meeting people. How does the guide address that?
Well, it emphasizes this idea of shared passions, finding those places where your interests intersect with others. So it suggests joining clubs or groups that revolve around things you genuinely enjoy.
So that could be anything, right? Like sports or books or art classes.
Yeah, anything. And it even suggests things like volunteering. If there's a cause that's close to your heart, getting involved in that way can be a great way to connect with people who share similar values.
Makes sense.
Even something as straightforward as taking a class or a workshop or attending community events, anything that sort of puts you in a space where you're naturally encountering people who have similar interests.
So it's about like increasing the odds, right? The more you put yourself out there, the more likely you are to bump into someone who could potentially become a good friend.
Exactly. And that kind of naturally leads to the next step, which is often the hardest part, making that first move.
Yeah, initiating contact. It can feel a little awkward, right? Like, am I being too forward?
Yeah. Right, but the guide, it breaks it down into these really manageable steps, like starting with a simple invitation. It could be something as casual as grabbing coffee or lunch, or suggesting an activity that you both
Like
enjoy.
even just a quick message, right? Like,
Yeah.
hey, I saw this and it made me think of you.
Yeah, exactly. And I think the important message here is that a lot of times, that hesitation is mutual. People want to connect, but they're waiting for someone to kind of break the ice.
So you might be doing them a favor by taking that first step.
Right, exactly. Okay, so you've made that initial contact. What about maintaining those connections? What does the guide say about that?
Well, it really emphasizes the importance of consistent communication. Like, friendships are like any relationship. They need nurturing, right?
Yeah, and it doesn't have to be these, grand gestures. It's more about those regular small acts of connection, like a simple check-in text or a thoughtful note or even just proposing regular meetups, even if they're brief.
Right? Like, hey, how's it going?
Exactly. Just staying on each other's radar.
Makes sense. But then the guide also it talks about balancing that with openness and patience. What do they mean by that?
Well, it's cautioning us against, trying to force a deep friendship too quickly. Like you don't want to rush things or overshare too soon.
Right, like let things unfold naturally.
Yeah, the guide really advocates for allowing that trust to build gradually through shared experiences, through those moments of vulnerability, and just that consistent support, through good times and bad.
And I like that the guide also points out that, not every connection needs to be this super intense best friend relationship.
Yeah.
Like it's okay to have different levels of friendship in our lives.
Yeah, and I think that's really important because it takes some of the pressure off, right? Like not every connection needs to be this all-consuming thing. Okay, so we've talked about the good stuff, but the guide also it doesn't shy away from the tougher aspects of friendship, right?
Right. What about those relationships that, well, maybe aren't so healthy?
Yeah, it talks about toxic friendships. And it actually gives some clear indicators to look out for. Things like consistent negativity, manipulative behavior, or
Right.
just that feeling of being drained after spending time with someone.
Like you walk away feeling worse than you did before.
Exactly. And the guide's message is so empowering here. It says it's okay to walk away.
Like sometimes that's the best thing for everyone involved, right?
Absolutely. Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground here, but there's one more piece that I think is really important. The guide encourages us to embrace diversity in our friendships.
Yeah, I love that point. It's like the more diverse our friendships are, the richer our lives become, right?
Exactly. The guide talks about how these different perspectives, these different life experiences, they can teach us so much. They open up our minds, they challenge our assumptions, they make us more well-rounded individuals.
So it's not just about finding people who are just like us. It's about seeking out those differences, those unique perspectives that can broaden our horizons.
Exactly. Okay, so we can't talk about friendship in the 21st century without addressing the elephant in the room, right? Technology. How does the guide approach that?
Well, it definitely acknowledges the role that technology plays in our relationships, but it takes a really balanced approach, right?
Yeah, it's not all doom and gloom. The guide actually offers some really practical suggestions for using technology to connect with people, like joining online communities based on shared interests, exploring those friendship apps, the ones that are specifically designed to connect people based on hobbies or interests.
Right, or even just scheduling video calls or virtual game nights to stay in touch with people who might not be geographically close.
Exactly. But the key here is balance, right? The guide emphasizes that digital interactions can never fully replace those in-person connections.
Right, it's about finding that sweet spot.
So to kind of bring it all together, this guide really highlights the ongoing nature of friendship. It's not a destination, it's a journey.
And that journey requires effort, right? Consistent effort. Like the guide talks about the importance of celebrating each other's successes, being there for those tough times, and just generally being the kind of friend that you want to have.
And that's the beautiful thing, right? When you put that energy out there, when you approach friendship with that intentionality, it comes back to you tenfold.
So what are some key takeaways that we want to leave our listeners with?
Well, I think first and foremost that making good friends, it does require effort, but it's so worth it. The
Mhm.
guide really emphasizes the profound impact that genuine connections have on our overall well-being, on our sense of belonging, on our confidence even.
And that building those connections, it starts with self-reflection, right?
Yeah.
Like being honest with ourselves about what we want and what we're bringing to the table.
Exactly. And then it's about having the courage to put ourselves out there, to initiate contact, and then to consistently nurture those connections.
And all that, it takes time, right?
Yeah.
Like the guide cautions us against trying to rush things, to trust the process.
Absolutely. So the learner, as you move forward, think about one small step that you can take today to either strengthen an existing friendship or maybe even initiate a new one. It could be as simple as sending a text or making a phone call or just taking some time to reflect on the kind of friend that you want to be. Because ultimately, building meaningful connections, it's one of the most rewarding things that we can do in life.
Absolutely. All right, that's all the time we have for this deep dive. Until next time, keep learning, keep growing, and keep connecting.